On my 43rd birthday, my family sat me at the table for a surprise. My daughter handed me a cheap trophy. World's #1 disappointment. They laughed. I smiled, thanked them, and left. A week later, my husband showed up at my old job crying, "She left us with nothing." I'd planned my exit. Their mockery made me stronger. My revenge is my freedom. I guess I should start from the beginning because this whole mess didn't happen overnight. It was like watching a slow-motion car crash, except I was the one behind the wheel and somehow didn't see it coming until it was way too late. So picture this. I'm 43, been married to the same guy for 22 years, got 2 kids who are basically adults now, and I'm working my tail off at this accounting firm downtown. Nothing fancy, just crunching numbers and making sure people's taxes don't land them in federal prison. But hey, it paid the bills and kept a roof over our heads. My husband Jake, he's one of those guys who peaked in high school football and never really got over it. Still wears his Letterman jacket to Home Depot like he's gonna run into his old teammates buying lawn fertilizer. Works construction when he feels like it, which honestly isn't as often as our mortgage company would prefer. But whatever, I picked up the slack. I always picked up the slack. The kids, well, my son moved out right after graduation and barely calls unless he needs money. Smart kid, actually. Got himself a decent job at Best Buy and stays out of trouble. My daughter, though, she's 20, and still living at home, working part-time at Target and spending most of her paycheck on makeup from Sephora. She's got this attitude like the world owes her something, you know what I mean? For years, I just rolled with it. Worked 50-hour weeks, came home to cook dinner, did the laundry, paid the bills, and pretended like everything was totally fine. Classic suburban mom stuff, right? Except somewhere along the way, I started feeling like I was invisible in my own house. Like I was just this walking ATM that also happened to know how to operate a washing machine. The signs were there, looking back. Little comments here and there about how I was too serious or no fun anymore. Jake would make jokes about how I was turning into my mother, which, side note, my mother was a saint who raised 4 kids, basically solo. But whatever. The kids would roll their eyes when I'd ask them to help with literally anything around the house. I remember this one time, maybe 6 months before my birthday. I got home from work and found Jake on the couch playing Call of Duty while there were dishes piled up in the sink from breakfast. I asked him if he could maybe load the dishwasher, and he goes, "Relax, it's not like we're having company." Not like I lived there or anything, but I kept thinking it would get better. Maybe when the kids were fully grown and out of the house, Jake and I could figure things out. Maybe when work calmed down, I could focus more on my family. Maybe. That's what I told myself every single day. Then came my 43rd birthday. Now, I wasn't expecting a parade or anything, but I figured after all these years, they'd at least try to make it special. Maybe dinner at Olive Garden, or heck, I would have been happy with a homemade card and a beer on the back porch. Instead, Jake takes me to Applebee's, which, okay, fine, I like their spinach dip. The kids meet us there, and everything seems normal enough. We order our food, make small talk about work and school, and I'm thinking this is actually pretty nice. Just a regular family dinner, nothing fancy, but we're all together. After dinner, my daughter gets this weird look on her face and goes, "Mom, we have a surprise for you back at the house." I'm thinking maybe they got me a cake or something. Maybe they planned a little party with the neighbors. I don't know, I was feeling optimistic. So we get home and they tell me to sit at the kitchen table. Jake's got his phone out recording, which should have been my first red flag, but I figured he just wanted to capture the moment. My daughter disappears into the garage and comes back carrying this trophy. Not like a nice trophy, mind you. This thing looked like it came from the clearance bin at Party City. She sets it down in front of me with this big grin, and I read the inscription, "World's #1 disappointment." For a second, I thought it was a joke. Like, maybe there was another trophy coming, or this was some kind of setup for a real surprise. But then I looked around the table, and they're all cracking up. Jake's recording, my daughter's practically in tears from laughing so hard, and even my son is chuckling behind his Bud Light. The thing is, I've been the butt of family jokes before. We all have those moments where someone roasts you a little bit, and everyone has a good laugh. But this felt different. This felt mean. This felt like they'd been sitting around talking about what a disappointment I was, and thought it would be hilarious to make it official. I must have sat there for like 30 seconds just staring at this trophy, trying to process what was happening. Part of me wanted to throw it across the room. Part of me wanted to start crying. But mostly, I just felt this weird calm wash over me, so I smiled. I picked up the trophy, looked at each of them, and said, "Thank you. This is exactly what I needed." And I meant it, just not in the way they thought. I excused myself, went upstairs, and sat on my bed holding this stupid trophy. That's when it hit me. They weren't wrong. I was disappointed. Not in them, but in myself. I was disappointed that I'd spent 20+ years being everyone's backup plan. I was disappointed that I'd let myself become the kind of person who would accept this kind of treatment and smile about it. But here's the thing about disappointment. It can either crush you, or it can wake you up. And I was definitely awake. Update. Hey everyone, thanks for all the support in the comments. I'm getting a lot of questions about what happened next, and trust me, it gets interesting. I'm still processing everything that went down, but I wanted to let you know I'm doing okay. Actually, I'm doing better than okay, for the first time in years. The real question is, how far would you go to reclaim your life if you realized you'd been living for everyone else? Because I went pretty far. The next morning, I went to work like nothing happened. Didn't mention the trophy, didn't bring up the birthday dinner. I just did my job same as always, but something had shifted in my brain, like a switch had been flipped. I started really looking at my life from the outside, and I didn't like what I saw. That weekend, I did something I hadn't done in forever. I drove to Barnes & Noble and bought myself a journal. Not a fancy one, just a regular spiral notebook from the bargain section. I started writing down everything. How much money I brought in versus how much everyone else contributed. How many hours I worked versus how many hours of housework I did. How often I asked for help versus how often I actually got it. The numbers were pretty eye-opening. I was covering about 70% of our household expenses, doing probably 90% of the cooking and cleaning, and getting maybe 10% of the appreciation. And that's being generous with the appreciation part. I also started paying attention to how they talk to me versus how they talk to each other. Jake would interrupt me mid-sentence to tell the kids some story about work, but if one of them was talking, he'd listen like they were delivering the State of the Union. My daughter would ask me to do her laundry while she was literally walking past the washing machine. My son would call asking for money, but never just to see how I was doing. It was like I'd been living in this fog for years, and suddenly I could see everything clearly. I spent the next couple weeks just observing and planning. See, here's what they didn't know about me. I'm really good with money. I mean, really good. I'd been managing our finances for so long that I knew every account, every debt, every asset we had. I also knew exactly what was in my name versus what was in Jake's name. And let me tell you, that was an education. Turns out, when you're the responsible one who handles all the paperwork, you tend to put most things in your own name. The house, the good car, the savings account. All mine. Jake's name was on the mortgage and the checking account, but that was about it. Legally speaking, I was in a much stronger position than I'd realized. I also started thinking about my job situation. I'd been at the same firm for 8 years, and my boss had been hinting about a promotion for months. Not just a title change, but a real promotion with a serious pay bump. The kind of opportunity that could set me up for the rest of my career. But I'd been putting it off because it would mean more hours, more travel, more responsibility, and who would take care of everything at home? Well, they'd just given me a trophy for being a disappointment, so clearly they'd figured out how to manage without me being perfect. I scheduled a meeting with my boss that Monday, told him I was ready to take on more responsibility, and asked about the promotion he'd mentioned. By Friday, I had a new job title, a $20,000 raise, and a company car. Not bad for a disappointment, right? But the biggest change was how I started treating my time. I stopped doing things that weren't my responsibility. Jake's laundry started piling up because he was perfectly capable of operating a washing machine. My daughter's room turned into a disaster zone because she was 20 years old and could clean up after herself. I cooked dinner every other night, instead of every night, and if someone didn't like what I made, they could order pizza. The funny thing is, they didn't really notice at first. They were so used to me handling everything that it took them a while to realize I'd stopped. But gradually, the complaints started. "Why didn't you pick up my dry cleaning?" Jake asked one afternoon. "Because it's your dry cleaning," I said, not looking up from my book. "But you always pick it up." "I used to pick it up. Now I don't." He stood there for a minute like he was waiting for me to explain myself or apologize. When I didn't, he just walked away shaking his head. My daughter was even more direct. "Mom, I don't have any clean clothes for work." "That's rough. Good thing there's a laundromat down the street." "You're being weird," she said. "I'm being exactly who you told me I was. Remember the trophy? That shut her up pretty quick." The thing is, I wasn't being mean or petty. I was just being honest about what my actual responsibilities were versus what I'd been doing out of habit. And honestly, it felt amazing. For the first time in years, I had time to read books, take walks, watch TV shows I actually wanted to watch. I felt like myself again. Update. Okay, so a lot of you are asking if I was planning to leave from the beginning, and the honest answer is no. I was just trying to figure out who I was when I wasn't constantly taking care of everyone else. But then something happened that made the decision for me. I won't spoil it, but let's just say my family's reaction to my new boundaries was educational. The question I'm wrestling with now is, when someone shows you who they really are, how long do you stick around hoping they'll change? About a month after my birthday, things came to a head. I was sitting at the kitchen table paying bills on a Saturday morning when Jake came stomping in from the garage. "The lawnmower's broken," he announced, like this was somehow my problem. "Okay," I said, not looking up from the checkbook. "Okay, that's it, okay? What do you want me to say? Call a repair shop or buy a new one or mow it with scissors? I don't really care. I don't have money for a repair shop." Now I looked up. "You don't have money for a repair shop, but you had money to go to Buffalo Wild Wings 3 times this week? That's different. How is that different?" He started getting that look he gets when he knows he's wrong but doesn't want to admit it. "You're being difficult." "I'm being exactly what you said I was. A disappointment. Disappointing people don't solve lawnmower problems." That's when he exploded. Started yelling about how I'd changed, how I wasn't the woman he married, how I was being selfish and cold. My daughter came running in from her room, probably expecting me to back down like I always did. Instead, I stood up, walked over to the counter, and picked up that trophy. I'd been keeping it right there next to the coffee maker as a reminder. "You gave me this," I said, holding it up. "You all thought it was hilarious. You recorded it. You laughed about it. So now I'm living up to your expectations. If you don't, like disappointing me, maybe you shouldn't have celebrated the fact that I was disappointing you." The room went completely silent. Jake's face was red, my daughter looked confused, and I felt this incredible sense of clarity. "I've been thinking about this for weeks," I continued, "and I realized something. You're right, I am a disappointment. I'm disappointed in myself for putting up with this for so long. I'm disappointed that I taught you it was okay to treat me like hired help. I'm disappointed that I forgot I was a person with my own needs and dreams." I set the trophy back down and looked at both of them. but I'm not disappointed anymore. I'm done. Done with what? My daughter asked. Done pretending this is working. Done pretending we're a happy family when we're not. Done being the only person who seems to care about anyone besides themselves. Jake was staring at me like I'd grown a second head. You're talking about leaving? I'm talking about living. There's a difference. That's when things got really ugly. Jake started making threats about money, about the house, about how I'd never make it on my own. My daughter started crying, but not the kind of crying that comes from being hurt, the kind that comes from realizing your free ride might be ending. I let them yell and cry and make their threats. When they were done, I went upstairs, pulled out the suitcase I'd already packed, and walked out the door. I'd been planning this moment for weeks, ever since I realized that the promotion at work came with a relocation option. There was a branch office in Colorado that needed an experienced manager, and they were offering a full moving package plus another salary bump. I'd already said yes. The apartment I'd rented was small but nice, and for the first time in my adult life, it was completely mine. No one else's mess, no one else's problems, no one else's expectations. Just me and my books and my coffee and my own thoughts. I left Jake a note explaining that I'd filed for divorce and that he could reach me through my lawyer. I didn't give him my new address or phone number. I didn't owe him that. The hardest part was my son. He called me 3 days after I left, and he was genuinely confused. Mom, what's going on? Dad's saying you just disappeared. I explained everything, the trophy, the years of feeling invisible, the decision to start over. He listened without interrupting, which was more than anyone else had done in years. I'm sorry, he said when I was finished. I didn't realize how bad things were. It's not your fault, honey. You've been living your own life, which is exactly what you should be doing. I just needed to start living mine. He understood, which meant more to me than I can explain. We talk regularly now, and he's even planning to visit me in Colorado next month. My daughter and Jake, on the other hand, spent the first week calling me every name in the book. When that didn't work, they tried guilt trips. When that didn't work, they tried threats. Finally, Jake showed up at my old job thinking he could somehow force me to come home. My former coworkers told me he stood in the lobby crying, telling anyone who would listen that I'd lost my mind and abandoned my family. He kept saying I'd left them with nothing, which was rich considering I'd been supporting them for years. The truth is, I didn't leave them with nothing. I left them with exactly what they'd contributed, which wasn't much, but it wasn't nothing. Jake still had his construction job when he felt like working. My daughter still had her job at Target. The house was paid off, and there was money in the checking account. They just had to figure out how to be adults without me doing it for them. Update. A lot of you have been asking for the final update, and I'm happy to share that I'm doing amazing. It's been 6 months since I left, and I can honestly say I've never been happier. Colorado is beautiful. My new job is challenging in all the right ways, and I'm finally living for myself. As for my family, well, let's just say actions have consequences, and some people have to learn that the hard way. The question I want to leave you all with is this. What would you do if you suddenly realized you'd been living someone else's life instead of your own? It's been 6 months now, and I'm writing this from my apartment in Denver with the mountains visible from my window. I've got a job I love, friends who actually want to spend time with me, and a bank account that's growing instead of shrinking. Jake filed a counter-divorce claiming I abandoned the family, but my lawyer shut that down pretty quick. Turns out, when you've been financially supporting someone for 20 years and they've been contributing the bare minimum, the courts tend to see things your way. He got the house, but he also got the mortgage payments. I got my freedom and most of our assets, which seemed fair considering I'd paid for most of them. My daughter finally got a reality check when she realized that someone actually had to pay the bills and buy groceries. She moved back in with Jake, but last I heard she was working 2 jobs and complaining constantly about how hard everything is. Welcome to adulthood, sweetie. The funniest part is that Jake tried to get back together with me about 3 months ago. Called me up crying about how sorry he was, how he'd changed, how he realized what he'd lost. I listened politely and then said, I'm sure you'll figure it out. You're very resourceful when you need to be. He didn't find that nearly as amusing as I did. My son came to visit last month, and we had the best time. We went hiking, ate at great restaurants, and talked about everything. He told me he was proud of me for standing up for myself, and that he'd never seen me look so happy. He was right. I hadn't been truly happy in years, maybe decades. The thing about starting over at 43 is that you know yourself in a way you didn't when you were younger. I know what I want, what I don't want, and what I'm not willing to compromise on anymore. I know that I'd rather be alone than be with people who don't value me. I know that my happiness is my responsibility, not anyone else's. I still have that trophy. I brought it with me to Colorado, and it's sitting on my bookshelf right now. Sometimes people ask about it, and I tell them the story. Most of them are horrified, but some of them get this look in their eyes like they're thinking about their own lives. That trophy was supposed to be an insult, but it turned out to be the best gift my family ever gave me. It woke me up. It showed me exactly what they thought of me. And more importantly, it showed me what I thought of myself. And I decided that both of those things needed to change. I'm not disappointed anymore. I'm proud of myself for having the courage to walk away from a situation that wasn't working. I'm proud of myself for building a new life from scratch. I'm proud of myself for choosing happiness over comfort. So, if you're reading this and you're feeling invisible in your own life, if you're doing all the work and getting none of the credit, if you're living for everyone else and nobody's living for you, consider this your wake-up call. You deserve better. You deserve to be appreciated. You deserve to be happy. And if the people in your life can't see that, maybe it's time to find people who can. Sometimes the best revenge really is living well. and I'm living very well indeed.